Welcome to Kern 9000's Horror House.
As you'll probably have noticed if you follow my YouTube channel, I like a whole bunch of things. There's videos about video games, horror films, Doctor Who, moral panics, and the thing is, I think I've got a very special thing to talk about today because I get to talk about a horror film. In fact, it's what you'd call a horror anthology film, which is one of my favourite types of movies, and it's based on a wonderful series of comics which, the EC horror comics were the centre of a moral panic, much like the video nasties were. And the film also features a very well loved actor who is probably mostly thought of for his role as the Doctor in Doctor Who. Okay, so I'm talking about The Vault of Horror, a horror anthology film made by Amicus Productions, a British film company based at Shepton Studios in England. It was filmed from August to September in 1972. It is the only Amicus anthology movie which does not feature Peter Cushing, most likely because he was very busy filming another film for Amicus called And Now the Screaming Starts. I can forgive its lack of the amazing talents of Mr. Cushing though, largely because it features another marvellous actor, the formerly mentioned future Doctor Who, Tom Baker. If you aren't aware what EC Comics are, then the easiest way to explain this is to say they were an American publisher of comic books which specialised in areas such as horror fiction, crime fiction, science fiction, and they primarily ran from the 1940s through to the mid-1950s. With the most well-known title being the Tales of the Crypt series, which of course would go on to give birth to the film version of Tales from the Crypt made by Amicus, and later the HBO TV series Tales from the Crypt. This film here, in fact, was a sequel to the Amicus film Tales from the Crypt, and was referred to in some cases and released sometimes in some markets with names like Further Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Crypt Part 2. In honesty, these titles probably make more sense really, as none of the stories contained in this film actually come from the EC comic series The Vault of Horror. The story The Neat Job originally appeared in EC's other titles, Shock Suspense stories, and the rest of the stories appeared in various issues of Tales from the Crypt. I guess they went with the Vault of Horror title for the film to keep the EC connection, but to make it stand on its own and not give anyone the idea that they would be at a disadvantage if they hadn't seen Tales from the Crypt. And the truth is, the film can stand on its own legs very well. You can enjoy it and the stories within it regardless if you've seen Tales from the Crypt or not. Okay, so the film, as I've pointed out, is an anthology story, but it has a what I would call wraparound story, which holds all of the short stories together. In this case, the story is that 5 strangers all get into a lift together, a lift in what appears to be an office block. They end up in the sub-basement, even though none of them pressed the button for that floor. In the sub-basement they find a fully furnished room. The lift's doors close and they're stuck down there, so they make the best of it. They settle down, grab drinks, begin to talk to each other, and they end up talking about dreams. And it is then that each one of them takes a turn and tells everyone about a recurring nightmare that they've been having. And these tales form the stories in this anthology. Okay, so now I'll talk about the stories. First there's a tale called Midnight Mess, taken from Tales from the Crypt issue 35. It's about a brother who tracks down his sister with the intention of killing her to claim her share of the inheritance. This is followed by The Neat Job, from the first issue of Shock Suspense stories. It's the tale of an obsessively clean and tidy man who marries what can best be described as a young trophy wife, who unfortunately for him doesn't live up to his ideals of a domestic homemaker, and this starts to drive him mad, and his reactions begin to do the same to her. Then we have This Trick Will Kill You, taken from Tales from the Crypt issue 33. A magician on a working holiday in India is searching for new tricks. Nothing gets his attention until he sees a girl charming a rope out of a basket with a flute. Unable to work out how the trick is done, he persuades her to come to his hotel room so that he can gain the skill. This is followed for Bargain in Death, which is taken from Tales from the Crypt issue 28. A man is buried alive as part of an insurance scam concocted with his friend. His friend double-crosses him, leaving him to suffocate. He is discovered when 2 trainee doctors bribe a gravedigger to dig up a corpse to help their studies. The final story is called Drawn and Quartered, and is taken from Tales from the Crypt issue 26. An impoverished painter living on Haiti, played by Tom Baker, learns that his work has been sold for large profits by dealers and critics, who told him that it was worthless, Because of this, he goes to a voodoo priest and his painting hand is given a strange power. Whatever he paints or draws can be harmed by damaging its image. Maybe it is because of Tom Baker and my fondness for the man, but Drawn and Quartered is definitely my favourite story in this film, and it actually makes me wish that he was involved in more horror films. The man is incredibly eccentric in his acting, and this gave us the wonderful alien Fourth Doctor, but this same quirk can help him come across as quite terrifying, in the sort of way that you really have no idea what he could be capable of, what's happening behind those crazy eyes of his. The whole of this film relies on little twists and turns, and in all honesty, if you're used to the sort of horror movie ideas that the sinner must somehow pay for his sins, then you will most likely, to some extent, see everything coming from a mile away, yet it still manages to draw you in. It's quite surprising that the HBO Tales from the Crypt TV series never reused any of these stories. After all, the opening story of that series was the one in the Tales from the Crypt Amicus film about Santa, so it's surprising they never touched on any of these. In conclusion, I'd recommend this film to anyone who loves horror anthology films, and anyone who loved the Tales from the Crypt TV show. It's a nice way to see more EC comic stories turned into film. And if you're a fan of Tom Baker and you want to see Tom Baker in a less heroic role, then this is definitely a great film to watch. Okay, that's Kerr9000 saying, keep on screaming, boys and ghouls.